The springtime brings us a lot of different things, but one thing spring brings to us is the celebration of Easter. So let me ask you, what are your earliest memories of the celebration of Easter? For me, probably just like for you, I remember Easter baskets and Easter egg hunts. When we were little at my home church, they would line us up and give all the kids Easter lilies, and we would carry those lilies down through the center aisle and place them at the front of the church to start out the Sunday morning celebration of Easter. Over the years, I've celebrated Easter at Duke Gardens and the Duke Chapel. I've celebrated in churches large and small, at a gazebo, at a zoo, in a gym, in a field, lots of different places. And for me, Easter has become this major event, this big moment. And I think that, for me at least, is a problem. It's something that I struggle with about Easter. And maybe it is for you as well, is that Easter becomes this event that happens, and then we move past it. And instead of it capturing us and capturing our imagination and changing who we are, it simply changes one day or one weekend for us. But there is significant power in the story and in the celebration of the resurrection of Jesus. And I want us in LifeGroup to dig into that and to explore it so that maybe as we move into the celebration of Easter, as you move into it, this year it can be more than an event. It can be something that begins to shift how you see and experience the world. Because here's the true power of Easter for you and me. Let me just go ahead and lay it out there for us. Easter has the power to change how we live in and see the world every single day. Here's what I mean by that. We have a lot of events in our life where there's a before and an after. High school graduation, before that, you're nothing but a high school kid. After that, in some ways, you're an adult. When you get married, when you have kids. Sometimes with world events like 9/11, there's a before and an after. And after it, it changes how you view and see the world, how you see yourself. After high school graduation, one of my best friends joined the Army, and he described for me what it was like to get inducted into the Army, how he got his head shaved and got all sorts of shots and got clothes handed to him that he would wear, and everything else about him got put away. He said on that day, everything for me shifted. How I began to see myself, how I engaged the world, how I watched the news changed for me. And I think that's the power of Easter for us. That when we begin to comprehend the truth of the resurrection of Jesus, it changes everything about how we see ourselves, the world around us, what happens in our families. We begin to live in a different way because of the resurrection. And the early church got this. When you read the New Testament, the letters of Paul, Peter, Hebrews, all of the other parts of the New Testament, other than the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, all of them only talk about one thing about Jesus. They don't talk much about his teachings. They don't talk about his birth. They don't talk about his family, really. They simply talk about his resurrection. When the early Christians talked about what it was that changed everything, that set them on fire to change the world, they talked about the resurrection of Jesus. Here's what Paul says in 1 Corinthians chapter 6. God raised the Lord and will also raise us by his power. Later in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, Paul says this, now I would remind you, brothers and sisters, of the good news that I proclaimed to you, which you in turn received, in which you also stand, through which you are being saved, if you hold firmly to the message that I proclaimed to you, unless you've come to believe in vain. For I handed on to you as of first importance what I had received, that Christ died for our sins in accordance with the Scriptures, and that he was buried, and that he was raised on the third day. This is the whole of it. 1 Peter says this, according to his great mercy, he has caused us to be born again to a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead. This is our great hope. This is the singular message that changes things. Jesus didn't come just as a teacher. Jesus didn't come just as the presence of God among us. Jesus came to release the power of resurrection. And what the power of resurrection is is a statement of God that in love and in grace, we are released from the unbreakable power of sin in our lives, that we are released from the undefeatable power of death, that sin has been broken, death has been beaten, so that when we look at the world around us, when we see pain and sickness, when we see sorrow around us, when we experience grief in our lives from the loss of those that we love, we see a bigger story. We see that God is not done at death, that when there is failure and brokenness, that that's not the end of the story. We continue to see with hope. C.S. Lewis, one of my favorite Christian writers, once said this. He said, "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." The resurrection for us is that lens that gives us the light to see the world. We see that even in times of war and destruction, that life will come. We see in the darkest days, we trust in the darkest days, but because of the power of resurrection alive in us, hope will rise again. In days when we feel lost and alone, we trust and believe because of the power of resurrection, we will be found again. And the world conspires against us to steal that truth away from us, to steal that lens away from our eyes. So in your group, spend some time talking. What is it that prevents you from holding on to the power of resurrection beyond just the event of Easter? What could you do? What could you do that would allow you to continue to stay engaged with and hold on to the power of resurrection throughout the year? And maybe share a bit of what's a place in your life right now, where you need to claim the power of resurrection, of life over death, of joy over sadness. I pray for you this Easter season that all of us might receive the power, again, not of an event, but of a way of life that we might enter into this year that would change who we are and how we live in the world.